Ferrari has problems, and the Maranello team is trying hard to solve them in order to give meaning to its 2025 Formula One Championship campaign, which, unfortunately must be said, has started in the worst possible way. Is time running out? Generally speaking, yes, especially in the top category of motorsport, where every small detail can make a big difference. However, nothing is lost. There are still 22 races to go, in which recovery is certainly possible. The Prancing Horse believes in it, and is working toward this goal. Even before the season began, during the pre-season testing session at the Bahrain International Circuit, we spoke about the first updates to the Italian car. Over the 3 days of on-track testing in Sakhir, things did not go as they should have. That is why, since the last week of February, the Maranello team has accelerated its development plan, aiming to introduce some initial updates in Japan if possible, with the rest coming in the Bahrain Grand Prix weekend. However, it won't be easy, and you can consider this a warning since the first 2 races have revealed additional unexpected issues. The most important element in generating aerodynamic load for a wing car is the floor. The Ferrari engineers and technicians are working on this key component with the intention of introducing some updates, benefiting from the various insights gathered from the data provided on track. The issue related to ride heights could also be aerodynamic in nature. After all, we know how delicate these elements are, as they are crucial to the overall performance of the car and to making any technical project effective under the current Formula One regulations. If we want to review recent events on track, we can analyze what is happening to Ferrari. The race at the Albert Park circuit in Australia remains shrouded in mystery. Why was the Ferrari forced to raise the car? Had they already calculated that it might not comply with the skid block regulations? Moreover, these components are non-linear, meaning that under high loads, stiffness increases significantly. This measure is also intended to reduce the complexity of setting up the car between qualifying and the race, where the level of aerodynamic load changes significantly. By increasing stiffness at certain loads, the goal is to achieve a similar response where the floor's lowering can be limited. The porpoising issue with the Spanish specification floor occurred because the floor oscillated between 2 limit configurations. It is therefore difficult to believe that Ferrari has a problem with rear suspension squat, or, to put it better, the full picture might not yet be clear. The Italian team has encountered issues where lowering the floor led them to go outside the regulations. Fine, but within that range of ride heights, the floor was working very well. Perhaps they deemed it worthwhile to take more risks with setup in an attempt to gain absolute aerodynamic load with the car. The SF-25 single-seater performs better at lower ride heights, but at the moment, it has a stability issue. With a greater degree of squat, the floor experiences more movement, and the overall downforce generated is lower. The Shanghai International Circuit was not favorable to the Maranello team, as the stiffer philosophies of Red Bull and McLaren proved more effective. There was little that could be done from this perspective, although the Italian side could undoubtedly have found a better balance than the one it had on track. Furthermore, if the issue is excessive floor wear at certain ride heights, it is possible that Ferrari is unable to exploit certain tricks as effectively as other teams. We know how many strategies are used to prevent excessive skid wear, particularly in the T-tray area and beyond. It is highly likely that this was what Charles Leclerc was referring to when, in Australia, he stopped discussing the topic in front of the microphones, unable to reveal more. The controlled flexing of certain areas of the floor is a well-established practice in Formula One. This is a method often pushed to the limit to bypass regulations while still passing inspections. A few millimeters of movement in fast sections of the track create a slight instability that, in the overall picture, prevents the car from running on rails like those of its competitors. This is why the SF-25 showed lower cornering speeds. Additionally, its suboptimal performance in Sector 2 further reduced the setup window across the entire circuit. Not all tracks will expose this issue in the same way, but at the Shanghai circuit in China, these were the critical points. In the sprint race, Red Bull and McLaren had not yet optimized certain sections, as has often happened in the past, meaning they still had untapped potential. Ferrari, on the other hand, performed well, considering the different forces at play. However, by the end of Sunday's race, the car was no longer competitive, even though it was lighter, by around 30 to 35 kilograms, just like in the sprint. As mentioned earlier, since excessive floor lowering can be controlled, it is unlikely that Ferrari cannot run certain ride heights solely because of excessive skid wear. In Charles Leclerc's case, this did not even occur. The issue must therefore be found at the aerodynamic level, specifically in the interaction between the floor and the rear suspension. Greater squat cannot be seen purely as a flaw, especially considering that it aids traction phases. These are simply different suspension philosophies. In China, these characteristics were more pronounced due to the unique and challenging track layout. Even during testing at the Bahrain International Circuit, Ferrari's cornering weaknesses were clearly visible. Something is not working properly on the aerodynamic side. It is therefore plausible that the aerodynamic map is still more limited than McLaren's while waiting for floor developments. The goal is to achieve better control of the airflow that is accelerated and manipulated beneath the car. It is important to remember that the floor-generated downforce is regulated by several angles, primarily roll and yaw. The vertical force is mapped based on variations in these two parameters to define a region where the downforce remains both stable and high. The larger this area is, in general, the better a Formula One car will perform. In the case of the Ferrari SF-25 single-seater, it is evident that this area is more restricted, and at the Shanghai circuit, this limitation became fully apparent in all its forms. The first floor updates are being developed precisely to address this issue, with the aim of improving airflow management and permanently expanding the aerodynamic map. McLaren arrives in Suzuka, leading the standings and as the favorite. However, to win again in Japan, the reigning world champions will need to work on the weaker areas of the MCL 39, such as qualifying and corner entry. Ferrari, on the other hand, aims to capitalize on its strengths, provided it brings effective solutions to the SF-25's issues. The Suzuka circuit is one of the most technical and fascinating tracks of the season. Its extremely low impact on braking systems, rated 1 out of 5 by Brembo, speaks volumes about the nature of the Japanese circuit. It is a smooth and flowing track with sustained speed throughout the lap, with qualifying averages just below 240 kilometers per hour. The hairpin and final chicane are the only true slow corners, while the rest of the layout is dominated by high-speed bends. Key sections include the first sector complex, the long spoon curve, demanding high stability, and the Degner curves, where precision and sharp turn-in make the difference. The succession of direction changes at over 200 kilometers per hour generates strong lateral accelerations, which have notable consequences. Suzuka is, in fact, the most weight-sensitive track on the calendar, where every additional gram on the car comes at a steep cost in lap time. Tire loads are also among the highest of the year, rated 5 out of 5 by Pirelli, on par with Barcelona, Silverstone, Zandvoort, Spa, and Qatar. This is further amplified by medium to high downforce setups, which are expected to increase compared to the first two races, likely bringing some new aerodynamic elements, particularly in the wings.